Hey, guys. Welcome. Hey, thank you so much for joining me on what? Episode 6 of The Strange Death of Alfred Hunt Howell. Yes. Thank you so much for being here today. Super duper appreciate it. It's kind of a gray Sunday here on January 22nd, 2023. And of course, we say hello to everybody. Thank you so much. All right. Well, we got quite a bit to do today. I just want to kind of make sure that we're actually live. I hate doing this. It's not the most. Oh, there we go. We are live. I see Ruby's comment. So everybody, thanks so much for being here. What's up, guys? All right. Well, today's episode is going to be a good one for you. I really feeling it today. We got the great Eric Colotti joining us in a little bit. He's going to do the second half of the show with me. So today's show is going to be basically split into two parts. We're going to get a little bit more personal about Nikolaj Aman. I actually got the first oral history testimony from someone who besides me out there. Remember, I told you in the first episode we were going to throw a stone in a pond and we were going to catch people in its wake. Well, it's starting, guys. It's starting. Yes, I got a great little passage today from a person who I will not identify. This person doesn't want to be identified, and I'm actually planning on speaking to this person this week a little bit more. We're going to try to work it out that we do a live stream together. But at the very least, I'm going to get a lot of information. He says he's got a lot of, remembrances from those days. And he had some, fairly interesting thing to say about Nikolai today, which we're going to get into. So it's going to be a good one today. And of course, I want to say thanks to everybody for hanging with me on this one. This case is not a famous case. In fact, nobody really knew about it until we started talking about it. And of course, we started in the Son of Sam realm a little under 2 years ago now at this point, March 2021, we started that. And of course, Son of Sam was huge. I mean, geez, my first channel had, by the time I got rid of it, it had like 15,000 subscribers. I had over 700 people paying a month for the locals and for the subscribe star. And it was a real movement that we all had together. And it was really one of the best times of my life, one of the most satisfying. But as you all know, we ended that portion of, we ended the Son of Sam. Why? Well, because we figured it out. It ended up not being that interesting a story after all. It was the story of one lone incel killer, angry at the world, and decided to take his frustrations out on everybody. But one thing that Son of Sam had that this case didn't have, of course, was fame, fame, worldwide recognition. And that helped us a lot. It helped us a lot gain a lot of viewers and a lot of fans and quite honestly a lot of friends as well. And so I was a little nervous going into the Alfred Hunt Howell story because, well, I figured who would give a crap about this? Yeah, this story was brought in because of the alleged Son of Sam connection, which most likely does not actually exist in the real world. But we're finding with this case, it's actually incredibly much more, in my opinion, much more interesting than the Son of Sam ever was and could be. And in fact, it's actually more important because whereas the story of Disco Dave Berkowitz was the story of one man wigging out on Pine Street, right, finding his neighbors in the phone book, starting terror campaigns against them, and all that kind of stuff. This Howell case, it really actually is a doorway. It allows us to peer into the inner workings of the deep state and to find out who our overlords are and what they're doing and what they have done and what they are continuing to do to this day. Because these networks that we're exposing in this, the Dodge Foundation, the all these radical 60s people that we're gonna be talking about more in future episodes, their progeny to this day is still out there spreading spiritual sickness. All right. We have this cat, Stephen C. Rhea, right? We're going to be parking in the Rhea pretty soon. And we're going to be learning a little more about what these creatures are doing to this day. This guy's talking about decolonize your ideas, sending all this spiritual sick filth down into Latin America about gender is a social construct, all this weird stuff that these people are trying to push on us. And So this case, the Howell case, is actually much more helpful to us as studiers and as researchers of the deep state, the New World Order, if you will, the people who really run things. And whereas we might not find a connection between the deep state players that we're exposing and the actual crime of the alleged murder of Alfred Hunt Howell, I have to say that this is still one of the most interesting cases and one of the most important things that I've ever researched. And I'm very happy to bring it to you guys. So I'm super, super appreciative of everyone out there who's going along for the ride on this. And today, what we're doing is we are starting the discussion of, well, what? Well, let me just bring it up, guys. Nikolai Aman opens his big fat mouth. Because remember, this cat right here, Nikolai Aman, my childhood friend, he's the one that started this. This guy, Alfred Hunt Howell, was dead and buried. He was cremated, dead and buried, with no investigation, no suspicion of murder, nothing. Of course, that's what makes this whole thing so weird in the first place. But he was forgotten. He was put into a lonely grave in Pennsylvania, and the world moved on. And then all of a sudden, this cat gets arrested in Harrison, New York. And the first thing he does is start opening his mouth about the Alfred Hunt Howell murder. So we're going to start into that today. We're going to start looking at when Harrison, the police department in Harrison, arrested this guy, and what then ensued. We are doing this extremely meticulously. You know how I like to work. We're going to be doing this in chronological order when we get into this, starting with the arrest, looking at the files, and because we need to answer questions, and it can only be answered if we do this investigation in the same chronological timeline that the police did it, in my opinion. And of course, I want to thank Book Club Warrior 22 for his invaluable help, well, making me realize the importance of chronology, of putting things in the right dates, and so on and so forth. And of course, I want to say a big shout out and thank you to the great Ruby, who every day when I ask her to find something for me, within 10 minutes, it's in my email. So we're going to be looking at some interesting articles that Ruby found for us today. Not necessarily having to do with Nikolai, but interesting nonetheless. So the first half of today's show, before Eric comes in, we're going to get into a little bit more personal stuff about this guy, more of my very vague remembrances of him. Actually, I have very clear remembrances of Nikolai. He was a good friend of mine, but we lost touch after sixth grade. As I've told you guys a million times, but maybe there's some new viewers here. Nikolai stole my parents' grocery money. My dad always had a pouch of like $100 in the kitchen, and my bedroom growing up. I have a feeling I'm gonna have to go to my old apartment and videotape this scene for you guys pretty soon because I'm talking about it so much. But my bedroom used to be off the kitchen, and so when we were hanging out one day, we were playing in my bedroom. I don't know, maybe I went to the bathroom or something, or I left the room, and Nikolai went and stole that money that was in the pouch. And he must have actually cased it. And that's going to be an interesting thing that we're going to talk about it today, because how did he know that there was that money there? It wasn't like in an obvious place. It was in a little pouch in the corner inside of another box. So the whole idea of casing places is going to come up in this case as well. And so just to acknowledge everyone in the chat, I want to say thank you. And Clue Off over here, I did several searches, but couldn't find anything about Nikolai either beyond his arrest. Yes, Nikolai is a freaking ghost. And that, as Donna T just said, and that, of course, adds to the entire mystery of this thing, because why would this guy be impossible to find? He's my age. He's 49. If there was a death record of him, we'd be able to find it somewhere. You would think that he would be computer savvy at the age of 49, that he would have an internet presence. He was released in 2009 from jail, and at that point it becomes an absolute ghost. There's no record of this guy's existence. There's nothing, actually. We're going to be showing you the most that you've ever seen about Nikolai. So let's get into this a little bit more, and I want to thank you to the close to 50 people watching. That's a great number. Hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. and remember that we are trying to have fun, but we are also taking this extremely seriously, and we are going through this case meticulously and in logical order. And there will be personal remembrances, and hopefully, I won't lose you along the way. All right, so and I know you're all waiting for Eric Galati to come in. He's going to be coming in a little bit later today. I wanted to start the show without him, and I wanted him here to when we start to get into the police files, because we're going to be looking at quite a bit of police files today. And but we're starting this, of course, with the personal. So, of course, this is our fifth grade class. You can see here, class 5231, 1983, 84. And I've showed this picture already several times, but there's always new people watching. So I like to just kind of like, let people know that here I am. This is Mrs. Gitlin, right? And of course, here is Nikolai right up here. And Nikolai was a very big kid, but his size didn't matter. He was actually, I remember him being a very gentle kid, not violent whatsoever. Uh, uh, what would be the word? Not subservient, but not a dominating personality. He certainly didn't seem like that to me. As big as he wasn't a thug or a bully, and nobody was scared of him. That just didn't occur. Actually, this kid Yijin was an incredibly dickhead. This guy was a dick, right? Right here. He was the one who was an asshole, right? But Nikolai was a nice, sweet boy. Eduardo, he was Eduardo Santiago. His name was Eduardo, but I always called him Eduardo with a G. I don't know why I did that. It was just something I did. We were boys. He was the first one to teach me the moonwalk. This person over here, actually, I'm not going to give her name, but her and I recently reconnected. I asked her about Nikolai, and she didn't have any recollection of him whatsoever, even though they're right here in the class. And that's the way it was back in the day. And this cat down here, Greg DeMamos, you should look him up. He's a very interesting person. He's a life coach. Not exactly sure where he lives, but him and I recently hooked up again too online, and he didn't remember Nikolai either. It's weird how Nikolai was in all these classes with us and no one remembers him. Greg was like, "Nah, I was too busy trying to hit on Dawn over here." Like Eddie Martinez and him were boys. But this guy hooked me up. Greg hooked me up with some local people in Riverdale who I haven't been in touch with for decades. And we just recently hooked up. So there's some exciting things happening in Riverdale, and I have started to make connections and start to talk to people, and things are going to start happening in that regard. And of course, here is Liza Irizarry. I was absolutely in love with her. Just looking at her here brings back memories. And of course, I had great memories of childhood. It was just a great time period, the 70s and 80s, growing up in this wonderful neighborhood called Riverdale that I had no idea whatsoever was Twin Peaks, was filled with all sorts of nefarious doings and deeds, and housing all these deep state players. It was a great place to grow up because, well, it was the city. We were 20 minutes away from Midtown Manhattan, and yet we had woods in our neighborhood. So we had that great mix of urban, suburban, even in a sense rural. Not really, don't quote me on that, but it was a great neighborhood to grow up in, and I for one am very happy that I grew up here. So here is our sixth grade graduation program right here. And the reason why I brought this up is because it's kind of part and parcel with the ghost-like nature of Nikolai Aman. All right, so you can see here, sixth grade, 1985. Our principal, she just died. This was an evil witch. I remember Mrs. Charles. I was wearing once in second grade. I was wearing a hat inside. It was cold. I was cold, right? So I was wearing a winter hat inside, and they brought me to the assistant principal's office, yelling at me, "You got to take your hat off inside." And I'll never forget. I said, "What's the big deal?" Right? A very serious question, and a very apt question. I mean, who cares if a kid is wearing a hat? But it was like the biggest deal to Mrs. Charles. She started screaming at me. Anyway, like a couple weeks ago, I saw her obituary in the Riverdale Press. Am I evil? I don't know. Am I evil? I was actually not. I didn't care. I was like, oh, that witch is dead. Uh, right? It just goes to show you should be a nice person, because, like, one day we're all going to die and people are going to remember us for the things that we did. And you don't want some punk saying, oh, thank God that person's dead. What an asshole they were to me as a kid. Anyway, but the point here is looking for Nikolai's name. The only place where Nikolai's name shows up in this entire program, and it's a little hard to see, but in class 238, Nikolai Aman right here. Okay. And here I am. Where am I? 235. Right here, Luis Grossman. Yes, my real name is Luis. My middle name is Manuel. I've never been known as Luis. My mom started calling me Manny ever since I was a little baby, and it just stuck. So, we're not going to go through this whole thing, but here's 2 more pages, and Nikolai's name is nowhere to be found. He never got an attendance award. He never got an athletics award. No progress awards. Nothing. Student leadership, zip, learning center awards. All of this stuff over here. All of these people who I remember and whose names are here. Elementary School Science Association, Principals Association. Now, you don't see my name either anywhere, but that's not the point, I guess. The point is that this guy was not distinguished in any way. Nikolai didn't make himself known. He wasn't a star pupil, and so on and so forth. I was somewhere over here. I don't remember exactly where. I think something to do with the putting together of the yearbook. But anyway, so here are some pictures from our 6th grade graduation, which I actually haven't looked at yet, because I wanted to look at them with you guys and see if we can find Nikolai in these pictures. Well, first off, my father took these pictures, so of course he's centered on me right here. And here we are singing "Memories All Alone in the Moonlight." Na, 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 na. And so anyway, I'm just trying to find Nikolai in here. Okay. That's not him right there, although it kind of looks like it could be. That's not him. I'm not quite sure. I don't see him in here. Here's Greg DeMamos, the life coach, who we just saw in my 5th grade class, and him and I were boys since we were like in nursery school. We were like best friends. So I'm looking here, nothing, nobody. Again, I wish my father had pivoted and taken more photographs. But we do not see Nikolai anywhere here at the 6th grade graduation. It doesn't mean he wasn't there. It just means that we didn't pick him. We didn't get him on camera. And it's funny because these childhood memories that you have, I actually remember being on this stage getting this award, and I remember this very moment here. It was like actually a moment that etched into my brain forever, because I remember thinking to myself, douchebags. They told us to walk off, turn. Hey, Scott Shapiro over here, turn. Right. But I don't know. This guy, Scott, he was a nice enough guy. I don't have any problems with Scott. But all right. So no Nikolai there in these vintage photographs. And of course, here are the only other known photographs of Nikolai that exist. Here's from our 5th grade class. Here is his resident alien card. And I thought these were actually quite poignant, because it shows a progression of Nikolai. This is him as an innocent child. This is him probably as a 12 or 13-year-old, maybe 15-year-old right here, getting his resident alien card. This is when he was arrested for the burglary in Harrison. And of course, this is when he was arrested for the alleged murder of Alfred Hunt Howell. Okay, so you see this nice boy morph into a relatively hardened criminal. I mean, remember, this guy was convicted of 1st degree of manslaughter. Whether he did it or not, that's a whole other issue. Okay, I mean, we have to just be honest with ourselves. I'm not convinced, and we're going to start looking at some of those little things today that make me that help me in my that make me not convinced that he did it. And of course, here's an article that Eric and I looked at. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but the Howell case suspect has local record from the Riverdale Press talking all about his, his horrible descent into criminal activity. He lived at 3900 Greystone Avenue, worked as a delivery boy. He had a record. He began a career of crime. He was arrested for forgery, burglary, breaking into a car. These things, keep these in mind, because when we hear our first oral history testimony of Nikolai today from a person who I just found yesterday, we're going to talk about, you're going to see echoes of this: forgery, burglary, and breaking into a car. Okay, and he was forging 6 checks. A month after Howell's death, he was arrested for breaking into a house right nearby where Howell lived, and so on and so forth. Breaking into a car at 5570. So of course, he was doing this as a 5th grader and 6th grader. He was already stealing because he stole from my parents. I mean, he stole, I don't know, probably $75 out of a pouch in my parents' kitchen. So he was already had these predilections as this youth here, right? But it hadn't yet turned into the full-blown sociopathy that it later became. So I just want to say hello to everyone in the chat again. We got Moet, we got Verity, we got Ruby, we got Agent 99, the gang's all here, and of course Cindy, who is a new name that I've never recognized before. You're very welcome, and of course, right back at you. Thank you so much for actually spending your precious time watching this weirdo talk about this case that really no one besides us cares about. But again, this case transcends just the Howell murder. This is a peek into, in my opinion, one of the most influential deep state nests that you never heard of. Okay, the Dodge Foundation and their people. They've been around since the 1830s, and the same people with the same last names, the same family members, are today spreading their filth and influencing the tastemakers in American society. So they need to be exposed, and that's what we're doing. And of course, it all led to this article here, which we've talked about a million times. But one of the few things that I always like to do is repeat stuff so it gets into your head, right? As a teacher at NYBG, I used to always start our every class with a slight review of what we did the week before, just to get everybody into the headspace. And that was one of the reasons, among many, that I had these amazing reviews for 10 years at the famous NYBG, all of course taken down because some Karen decided to complain about me in 2020. Anyway, so this is all, remember, as the bullet-riddled body, his killer calmly strode into the kitchen looking for something to eat. His eyes settled on a box of cookies. The forensic tests had lead in it and the ashes. Blood was pouring out everywhere and all sorts of stuff, 22 caliber, right? All of these things that we're going to have to deal with as researchers in this case, because this was what was reported to the public. Yet the truth is, about as opposite as you can get, given already what we know, which is that the initial reports by the police, experienced detectives, ostensibly, even though the 50th precinct was, as Book Club Warrior 22 says, a slow precinct, they still had detectives who knew a thing or two, and they all said nothing suspicious in those initial reports. Now, I just want to let everyone know, for full disclosure, I did speak to this author right here, Jorge Fitzgibbon. I asked him if he would do me the honors of talking to me about this case, about what he remembers, how he came to write this article, and so on and so forth. And I have to just report back to you that Jorge Fitzgibbon wrote back to me, and I'm paraphrasing: "Manny, I've written thousands and thousands of articles in my life. I don't remember anything about this." This is something that I don't even remember doing. All right. So it just goes to show you that this wasn't a big deal to Jorge Fitzgibbon and ostensibly the other author, John Marzulli. And so therefore, we have to take what's in here with a grain of salt. They weren't doing investigative reporting here. They were actually stenographers for the system. And when we go through the police reports over the next few shows, we're going to see exactly where they got all this information from the initial confessions of Nikolai, which changed over time. Okay, so we're gonna get to thing. And I also want to say to anybody watching who's new out there, from the Riverdale area, because I just started putting out feelers to the local community about this case, and getting a few people interested. So if anybody's watching for the first time and you're local Riverdalian, big shout out. We can use you for local information. So always feel free to reach out to me. All right. So Roger here says, I think a family member killed him, not Nikolai. I mean, anything is possible. We're gonna look that Alfred Hunt Howell might not have been alone in that house that night. There might have been somebody in that house with him that we're gonna talk about at some point. And DJ, thank you. Stenographers for the system. Well, that's really all they are, right? All these people are. Lydia Lilly, of course, says, why would a career burglar and thief suddenly graduate to murder? That's what bothers me. Yeah, and it bothers me too, especially since, again, as I spoke about a few times, Nikolai was a sweet kid. He was a thief, no doubt, but he was a sweet kid growing up. He didn't have a violent bone in his body. Nobody knew him as a thug, a bully. Nobody had ever gotten into a fight with him. I don't remember him having beef with anybody. None of that. What does book club say? Book club always gets the respect of getting it. That article was written after the case was reopened. In my opinion, the elitist ties that everyone is infatuated with influenced the way the facts were given to the reporters. All right, fair enough. Very, very good. All right, so let's carry on. So here's an interesting little personal thing here. So this is from the Harrison Police Department. Once they arrested Nikolai, they started investigating some of his burglary ties. And they must have found some girl in Riverdale here, because on 12/13/96 at 1200 hours, Redacted and I spoke to Redacted, and she gave us a pearl necklace imitation that Nikolai Aman gave her approximately 4 weeks ago. She also gave us a letter that Nikolai sent to her from jail. Inside said letter was a letter to blank and one to blank. So Nikolai must have sent this girl or teenager or 20-year-old, I don't even know what she was, probably someone around our age, a letter with another letter, two other letters for people in it. And hey, guess what? We have that letter. So, of course, letters are a big thing to all y'all out there in Son of Sam land, because not only was what's his face? Give me a second here. Was Disco Dave the actual letter writer of the Son of Sam letters, the famous Breslin and Borelli letters? But of course, Disco Dave Berkowitz also was a prolific writer in general. Eric Galati and I did a series called Psychiatric Sunday, which dealt with his voluminous amount of letters that he sent to Dr. Abramson, however you want to pronounce it. The guy loved writing. I mean, plain and simple, he loved writing. So interesting that in this case, Nikolai didn't have a similar love of writing to Disco Dave, but there are letters in this that are somewhat poignant. So I want to actually read these, because again, we're trying to humanize this guy here. Dear whoever, and number 2. So this must have mean, like, I don't know who wrote that, whatever. Hi, how are you? Thanks for writing back to me so soon. I didn't think it would be so fast. I am fine and still here in the same cell. You don't have to worry about me. I can take care of myself in here. When I wrote to you last time, I said I wanted to one day sit down and talk about everything. I said that only because I don't want you to think any less of me. You say you are my friend, and I know that now. But blank said the same thing, and where is she now? The police from Harrison went to her house and her boyfriend's redacted house. Now she thinks I told on her and her boyfriend. Redacted's boyfriend and another, quote, friend of mine and me used to do a lot of stupid things together. Even Redacted does a lot of bad things. But because I got caught and I am on probation from 195, everybody thinks I'm going to tell the police everything I know so I can go home sooner. The only reason why the police went to redact his house was because I left her address as my home. And the only reason they went after her boyfriend is because he was my redacted in June on redacted charges. So must have been an accomplice of his in some burglary. Redacted. You are a funny, smart, sweet, and very beautiful woman, says here, girl, woman, with a handsome little boy who needs you. You have problems with your papers and a lot of other things. The last thing you need is another problem. Just remember me the way you do now. It's a long time from now when I am coming back. By then, you will probably have that little girl you want so much and a good life. So please just let me do my time and take care of yourself because you really are a good person. Love always, Nick. So anyway, so there's just a little more humanization of this guy, and it's also giving us a little bit of an insight into the ways in which the police ended up finding this guy, and that'll become more apparent as we go further down the rabbit hole of his confessions and then how the police investigated. But we ain't there yet. We're doing this very slowly and very meticulously. So of course now we have the contents of Nikolai Amann's wallet, which I don't even know why I put this in. But what I'm trying to do again is just any personal thing that we can find out about this guy is important to me. So because these were in the files, well, I figured we should talk a little bit about them. So this was what they found in Nikolai's wallet. Now, I don't understand why everything is redacted. It makes no sense, but this is a locksmith, hardware, keys, locks, and for a thief, it's interesting. And this up here must be the owner of this business here, and it says here buys stolen good. Garage around corner, Netherlands. Have stolen items, garage right number 3580. So interestingly enough, there is a Netherland Avenue here in Riverdale, and there is a 3580 Netherland Avenue. So let's see this place. Give me a second here. There we go. All right, so this is the Riverdale neighborhood in question. Now, just so we can orient ourselves a little bit, we did see this in episode 1. Right about here is where Alfred Hunt Howell lived. This is the estate area of Riverdale. Here's Wave Hill, where they rezoned it. Alfred Hunt Howell and all his friends rezoned this entire area here, so it would never ever get the big buildings that you see over here. Okay. Notice how there's no big buildings here. That was a very deliberate thing done by Howell and his friends, Morgenthau, Curlin, the Dodge family, and, so they and that goes all the way down to here, where you start to get bigger buildings down here. So this is the Riverdale neighborhood. This is where Nikolai grew up, right here, 3900. Where would it be? 3900. Sorry, right here, 3900 Greystone Avenue. And we talked in the last walk and talk about the interesting numerous times that the word Greystone comes up in this case. Nikolai lived on Greystone Avenue, which is right here. He lived in a building called Greystone Manor. The Dodge Mansion, which is roughly somewhere over here in this area. Okay, that's it right there, actually. Right there. That's the Dodge Mansion. Okay. That's called Greystone. Right. And to complete the circle a little bit, the Stein brothers, who were the Riverdale press people, they lived here as well, 3900 Greystone Avenue. Okay, so this was Nikolai's building, and we just did a walk and talk there, just so you can see the local area. This is where I grew up, in this building right here, a very similar building to 3900 Greystone. This was, and in the garden here, I planted all this stuff as well. So if you ever are in the neighborhood and you want to see one of my creations, I did this entire building. I replanted it in 2013. So that's where I grew up, and right here is where this 3580 Netherland Avenue is. Okay, so let's take a walk. Let's take a walk down there and look at this. Um, sorry, let's take a look at this store at this front, because this is where Nikolai, right here, in this garage right here. That's 3580. You could see right there, 3580 Netherland, right here. And for all I know, to this day, this is still a fence that buys stolen goods. I don't know, right? But I remember when this place went up, this was like a new construction, right? I still consider this new, even though they built it in like 1981 or two. It's funny how it works that way. But right here is that place located, is the place that was in what's his Nikolai's thing, Nikolai's wallet. So let's get back to our thing here. So 3580. Okay. And we see here just more of the same. I have no idea what this is. Looks like a like like maybe something from the jail. If unable to come in, please telephone in advance. I have no idea what this is. It looks like we used to have in textbooks, or like when you took out a library book, that we had cards that look like this. But I really don't know what this is whatsoever. Now, here's an interesting page because, well, this isn't completely redacted. Now, I should have, but I did not go into what these are right here. Okay. But you guys just pause the screen if you want and type this at one point into your search engines and see what comes up. I should have done this. Honestly, I should have done this, but I didn't. I think I did this on purpose, not to didn't do this so we could keep a little mystery going and have you guys get involved. Okay, so right there is, and I don't know who wrote this. This might have been written by the police. But it doesn't look like Nikolai's hand. Excuse me, it doesn't look like Nikolai's handwriting to me. But interesting that the entire page is redacted. And then of course we have here, he liked his girls from with the denim shorts and white t-shirt, right? 4-star auto glass, on the go communications, paging and cellular, gallery 2 collections. These must have been all places, Ace Auto Sales. These must have been all places that he dealt with as a criminal. Garage opener 1 to 9. Again, I'm not saying that for a fact, but new auto glass, auto sales. This looks like a place that buys estate merchandise right here, and so on and so forth. So book club was talking about that one sheet here. Perhaps probation or parole officer appointment from the first caller. Ray J had a very similar thing. Parole daily sign-in sheet. That address now. Oh wait, I was saying something. So Lily says that address. So I'm assuming Lydia is talking about 3580. Now houses a psychotherapy group called Bava. Well, let me tell you something. Riverdale was the biggest COVIDian cult place, one of the biggest COVIDian cult places in New York City. This place was destroyed by these people, these horrific individuals. So a lot of people in this neighborhood do need psychotherapy. So anyway, that's another point. All right, so let's see what else we got in here. Okay. Call anytime from work. I want you. Where are you? Hold on. What does this say? Let's just get that. You're something. I can't read that exactly. And then it has July 28th, redacted after 6 p.m. Again, I have no idea what any of this stuff is. The redactions are extremely frustrating to me. But we just have to deal with what we have to deal with. It's dial-up internet. So Cindy said it's dial-up internet. I'm assuming those were the websites that we saw before. Ruby said both sides don't work. That doesn't surprise me in a sense, because we were talking about some websites from like when was this? This was 1996, 97. right? So the earliest of websites. So too old. Exactly. All right. So this is what you guys are good at. Thank you so much for doing that for me. I appreciate it. So I found this interesting. He had a travel agency's Scarsdale Travel Services. Okay, I wonder why that's redacted, and I wonder why a thief from Riverdale would need the services of Scarsdale Travel Service. Scarsdale is pretty far away from Riverdale. It's a very exclusive part of Westchester County, one of the most exclusive areas at all of Westchester County that exists. So interesting that Nikolai would have that. And then, of course, movies, no parties, Skyline 100 Route 46. That's in New Jersey out there. So if anyone wants to look what that is, 100 Route 46, that's New Jersey. And of course, the very frustrating redactions all over the place. All right. Well, we got our wonderful guest who just signed in. So I'm going to put on my headphones so I can hear this fine gentleman. Let me just give me a second here. And of course, I wanted this fine gentleman to join me for this portion of the show, taking us out to the end, because, well, his mind is second to none. We love his analysis. We love his analytical abilities. And basically, we just love him as a person. So without further ado, may I present to you a man you all know, a man you all love, the one. Moet, you know what's coming next. The only Eric,
How you doing?
we're
A
doing
great
great. Doing great.
first half of the show. This was meant to be going way back on one of the first three shows I did with you when you showed that school group photo and mentioning Nikolaj Amann being arrested for the murder of Alfred Howell.
Yeah, this
You
is
had to do this. You had to do this show finally. Excuse me if I'm a bit scarred. I don't know what the bloody hell I did with the razor shaving, but I was about
it's the
half an hour closing the wounds.
we caught you. It's the Black Eye Club. We know that you're really secretly a deep stater. You were sent in. We
Yes.
know it. We know it.
Oh,
So real quick. So Judy had a question here. What was Nikolai's home life like during childhood? There had to be something not quite right. Okay, so let me answer this to the best ability that I can. Nikolai did not have a father. Nikolai lived with his mother. Nobody ever knew of a man in Nikolai's life. There was no adult males ever. I was at Nikolai's house probably 3 or 4 times for birthday parties and for various little get-togethers with him and other people. I remember his mother was a very elegant woman, a very stern woman, very regal in her presence, very big woman, not fat or obese, just very big. And that probably is where Nikolai got his big nature from. He was a very tall and big person. And but I never saw any abuse. I never saw any signs of abuse. Of course, I was only 12, 13 years old at the most before I lost touch with this cat. But there were never any rumors going out around about this guy, but that's the extent I know. What was happening behind closed doors with him and his mom and maybe other men in his life, I just have no clue. All right, Eric. So before we carry on, any initial thoughts before we get our first oral history testimony about Nikolai?
I have a lot of thoughts, and they're all questions because the deeper I get involved in this and I read over and over, the more contradictions there are. And it's, I was thinking of Book Club Warrior. He said in different words as I did that it was a botched or sloppy investigation before when they said it was a heart attack and so forth. I actually believe this, I'm speaking for myself, that there was something deliberate that was covered up before it was reopened. And I'm wondering if somebody told the police who went to interview him when he was in jail at, is it
Bear Hill.
Bear Hill prison, if someone, given this new information, had told them that he was at the Howell house when a murder took place. I'm trying to find out the link. It doesn't make sense that a man in jail for burglary and thievery is going to start talking about a murder. It makes no sense.
It doesn't make sense. So just real quick, book club just wants to correct the record. Whoops, sorry. Hold on. Never said it was botched. I said it was handled routinely. So again, we want to make sure the book
I'm sorry, book club. I thought you had said it was a bit sloppy the way they did it. My apologies.
No, I remember book club saying that they did it by the books. Nothing seemed amiss to him. And of course, that then, regardless of that, that brings in the mystery of how could they not find this blood pouring everywhere, bullet holes from repeated shots, right? All this weird
So
stuff.
my apologies, book shot, but from my point of
Book
view,
club.
a book club. My apologies, book club. I just can't see how they put a man in a cloth, carry him out, the funeral parlor director. We now know the names, by the way, of everybody who was there because of these files. The later files are not redacted. We know every police officer's name. We know the name of the medical examiner and and guard. We know the name of the physician of the family, Pastel. We know who was a witness there, a cousin. You say the name is Peter, right? Not Arthur as they have it here.
Right.
Peter Weedline. And we know the name of the man who found him, the butler, caretaker, attendant. Nobody mentioned seeing a bullet hole.
Nobody mentioned it at all. And of course,
it makes no sense. And for me, it's deliberate. It's a routine cover up, I'll say.
And you bring up some points that will add, of course, to the mystery later, because there's issues here as we've been looking through these files. There's issues here with timeline. There's issues here with MO. There's issues here with when was the last time he was seen, and so on and so forth. And now we have the additional issue of, yes, there was Alfred Hunt Howell's nephew was in the house. Now I don't want to say that for sure, but from the reading of the evidence so far, and we're not there yet, Eric. We're not anywhere near getting to that point in this investigation. Right. But from what I'm reading so far, there was another person in that house that night besides Alfred Hunt Howell and Nikolaj Aman. Even if Nikolai Aman was actually even there to begin with. So that is a mystery in and of itself. And of course, we want to find out about that as we go along. But before we get into the nitty gritty of the police reports, we just still have a couple other personal things to get to about Nikolai. And I wanted Eric to be a part of this because Eric often has insights that I just simply don't have, and I enjoy the banter. So anyway, this came to me yesterday from a guy who saw a post that I made, and I'm not going to say where I posted, but I have put out feelers to the Riverdale community. I don't want to say where I posted because I don't need knuckleheads coming in there and trying to sabotage me. But I put out feelers to the Riverdale community, particularly the age group that was around in the 70s and 80s, into the 90s. And I got a couple hits. Within 5 minutes, I got a couple hits on Nikolai. And this was the one that came to me first. And I'm going to try to set up a meeting with this guy this week. I'm going to try to get him on a live stream because he said that he probably has more to tell me. But this is what he said, and I left it in here completely unedited. I just copied and pasted the email that I got, and I am not going to identify this person until he gives me permission. Hi, Manny. I did not want to post in the group, but I knew Nikolai during that time. I grew up on 238th Street, and he started showing up and hanging around our corner in front of the pizza shop. I remember he was stealing Lincoln Town cars and driving around 231st Street and picking up fares like he was a cab. Actually, super smart if you think about it. And we knew he was robbing houses. The rumor was that he broke into a place on Palisades and the person was home and he hit them with a lamp or something and killed them. I don't even remember hearing about Alfred Hunt Howell. I have no idea how or why he randomly started showing up on our block, but looking back on it, I haven't thought about him all this time since then. He was probably just trying to find some other like-minded kids to try and pull some heists with. When he got locked up, nobody was surprised. Actually, we were all probably more thankful that he didn't talk to any of us breaking into anything with him. He may have been around us for a month or so, maybe 2 at the most. Just a blip on the radar. I hope this helpa. Okay, again, I'm just reading it as it came to me. That should say helps, but the A is next to the S, no big deal. And of course, here's the person that he was talking about, not the cherubic little boy from 6th grade, but the somewhat hardened criminal by the time he reached about 25, 26 years old. So do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, there's a clue with what he has informed you, and I believe what this man has written to you. What he has informed you is a clue as to how they could have suspected him as being involved in a murder.
Can you stop for a second, Eric? Because I stupidly forgot to put this on the screen when I was writing. I just want to give the people a chance to absorb
That's
this
right.
for like 20 seconds. Okay. So again, here's Nikolai and here's the remembrance. Lincoln Town car driving around 231st Street and picking up fares like he was a cab. That's kind of sociopathic and disturbing to me, actually.
Well, they used to call them gypsy cabs here in New York. Somebody who would just go out on his own and be a taxi driver without being affiliated with any livery station or taxi stand.
Right. So anyway, I just want people to absorb this all before you give us your opinions, because I stupidly forgot to show this when I was reading it. But all right. So anyway, people have gotten the gist of this. So what were you saying?
Well, I never pay attention to rumors, but here, when it's criminological, one should always keep in the back of one's mind a rumor. Here we have a rumor out on the street that many knew that he had broken into a home and hit a man over the head with a weapon. Is that what he says? With a lamp or something.
Right.
Because people knew of that, and that rumor was going around, that could have been picked up by someone in law enforcement, which is why when they investigated him for burglary, they wondered if, because we eventually find he was supposedly with a gang that pulled off these burglaries in upper middle class homes and affluent homes. That's why they tried to tie him together with this rumor that he did that.
So yeah, but the thing is, he admits to it later. So again, it's very shadowy and weird. But yeah, we do have the fact that there was a rumor going around the neighborhood. And just so everyone knows, 238th Street is right there by Nikolai's house. He lived at 3900 Greystone. And the way that it works in New York City, everybody out there, is that if you have 3900, that means it's the first house on 239th Street. If you have 3800, it's the first house on 238th Street. So he lived right around the corner from 238th. So all this makes sense. There was a pizza shop there. I remember it well. Luigi's Pizza was my spot. So yeah, so it shows that he was hanging around people, trying to get people involved in his little burglary ring, and that he was stealing Lincoln Town cars. And we're going to see the Lincoln Town car in these police files. So that rang true.
And it's plural, cars.
Right.
Lincoln
He was
Town cars. If he was also a thief of Lincoln Town cars, were the police not on the lookout for who's doing that?
Well, this was New York City during the time period when thousands of cars were being stolen probably every week. So it's unlikely that they were setting up a task force just to find out, who was stealing Lincoln Town cars. It could be, but I doubt it. Dom Tulipso, who's always good, was Nikolai Albanian. No, Nikolai, it's weird. We always called him Russian, but that's probably just because we were ignorant. And in 1982, everybody who spoke with an accent from Europe was Russian. Like we just thought but it turns out he was a Danish national.
Maybe the mother was Russian. Nikolai sounds more Slavic than Germanic.
Correct. And Aman, I'm not even sure what kind of name that is, to be quite honest. So we don't. So it's very shadowy. But I do know that he did not grow up like he did. He wasn't born here. He just showed up one day to PS24, and we just all said, "Oh yeah, this is the Russian kid." So that was that, and we didn't really know.
But I think that's a very good contribution. It's very honest, not somebody trying to impress you. You know, he says, I don't even remember hearing who this was. He states it's a rumor, not a fact, not even gossip. And, but he was known as being a thief.
He was
You
definitely known as being a thief for sure.
know?
Absolutely. And that bears out in the police reports, as we're going to read as we go along. Now, interestingly enough, this guy then sent me another email saying, "Did you ever hear about that stabbing that took place? That took place where a woman was stabbed like 30 times?" And I wrote back to him and I said, "Well, quite honestly, no. Are you talking about Mrs. Greif, my third grade teacher?" Because here's another story from childhood. So I had this horrible teacher named Mrs. Greif in third grade. She was horrendous. She would hit Rogelio, this poor kid from Latin America who didn't even know English. She would hit him in front of all of us in class. She would like punch him in the back. It was like terrible watching. It was traumatic. She was the worst woman on earth, besides my upstairs neighbor. But anyway, the she ends up getting stabbed to death by her husband about a couple years later. And so that's who I thought he was talking about. But I looked up what he was talking about, and it turns out that at Greystone Manor in 1986, the same building that Nikolai grew up in and where the Steins grew up in, the same year that Nikolai's stealing money out of my parents' kitchen, there was an incident where a wheelchair-bound woman lost her fight with slayers, and it was a 68-year-old woman. And now it wasn't Nikolai that did this. It was a woman, a crack addicted home care attendant was arrested for this. But this lady was stabbed 90 times, Eric. 90 times. A woman named Edna Fusoli or something like that, of Fumasoli. And here, Tudor style building on Greystone Avenue. Okay. And in this article here, it talks about, it gives the address, 3900 Greystone Avenue, Edna
He's the
Fumasoli.
killer of two.
Yes, she did. The same woman, Annette Washington, 28 of West 190th Street, killed two people. She was a home health care attendant, and she went back and killed a couple of people that she was taking care of. So one of them was Loretta Flaherty, and the other was Edna Fumasoli of 3900 Greystone, which was again the same building that Nikolai grew up in, and where I just did our recent walk and talk. So this isn't connected. I'm not trying to say anything, but it does mean that this guy who gave me this information here was on the money. He's not bullshitting me. This isn't a guy trolling me. He was telling me stuff that actually really happened. So
In fact, I believe that man. That's an excellent piece of information. Even when he says, "I have no idea or why he showed up on our block," you know, he's a person who cares and he writes well.
yeah, exactly. And he's open to speaking more. I'm going to be getting in touch with him this week. And
Mhm.
my hope is that one of our next shows will be a live stream with this cat to tell us more of his memories. Because remember, we're the only place on earth where anybody's going to find out about Nikolai Aman, because quite frankly, we're the only people who care. But this is a hella interesting story. And so we're doing the same thing. It's happening again. We're starting to get the local community invested in this, and we are going to start getting oral histories and testimonies, just like we did in Son of Sam.
It's
Okay.
going to come pouring out. All of a sudden, a dam is going to burst and it'll be like an upload. And well, the upload of David Berkowitz is what gave us these files.
Is what gave us these files, exactly. And of course, you guys can go and look at these files yourself. We're not here doing woo-woo stuff. We're not here with magic or anything. This is stuff that you guys can all look at yourself and analyze yourself. And probably it's best that you do that, so you can keep me honest. Not that I'm gonna do anything untoward, because that's not my style. But it's always better that people are more informed than less informed, because I may make a mistake that somebody may catch, and that happens all the time. All right, so Eric, we're here at the point where Harrison Police Department arrests Nikolai, and this is really where we should start in this investigation, in this forensic investigation. We've already done the talking about the initial police reports of finding the body, and we needed to do that in order to contradict the articles that were written. right? Which go totally against what was in those initial police reports, and therein lies a big mystery, which hopefully we'll solve. But now we need to start getting towards Nikolai's confessions, right? Now there's
Harrison
multiple.
is Westchester County.
Correct. So it all starts when Harrison Police Department arrests Nikolai for a burglary. Now, this is a very interesting document, and I want to read this document to you guys, and because it speaks to certain things which we're gonna certain questions which we have about the Howell case. But let's get into it first. All right. So this is to the Crime Analysis Unit, Westchester County Department of Public Safety, from the Harrison Police Department Detective Division, in reference to a semi-organized gang operating out of the Riverdale section of the Bronx. They call themselves the Redacted. They have committed the following crimes in the tri-state area: burglary, residential and commercial, car thefts, robbing individuals at gunpoint at ATM machines. All right, so we're not dealing with Boy Scouts here, and
No.
this Eric speaks to what this guy was talking about before, right? How he wanted all his how Nikolai wanted him and his friends, like-minded kids, to try to pull some heists with.
Mhm.
So this gives a little bit more credence to this right here. Nikolai was operating with an organized gang of people.
Right. And because it says semi, therefore he constantly wants to gain comrades in crime. It's not as
Correct.
if it's a fixed, but at the same time, notice it says the tri-state area. Now, yes, you could say Westchester County's in the tri-state, but does this also mean on a broader scale that actually crimes were committed outside of New York?
Yeah, it's possible.
You know,
Connecticut and New Jersey
right.
for
And
sure.
keep in mind, Janine Pirro is the district attorney at the time here.
Right, Janine Pirro, the famous Janine Pirro from Fox News right now. All right,
Mhm.
so this is when it all begins, folks. 11/15/96. On 11/15/96 at 12:50 hours, patrol responded to a private residence in an affluent neighborhood on an activated burglar alarm. A burglary was discovered. At 13:05 hours, approximately 3/4 of a mile from the scene, we arrested Nikolai Andre Aman, date of birth. Okay, it's actually 8/20/73 for anybody who wants to look that up. It's
Yeah.
August 20th, 1973 for burglary. Now check this out. Nikolai Aman was driving a stolen 1996 Lincoln Town Car, color black, the same exact color, the same exact car that our oral historian a few
Mhm.
slides ago said that he was driving around Riverdale looking to pick up fares with. Okay. So the vehicle also had switched plates, TLC plates that were not reported stolen as of the arrest date. The vehicle had a broken rear window, which was covered in plastic. In the suspect's vehicle were proceeds from our burglary and proceeds from a burglary that occurred in Redacted. Also in the vehicle was the following property that has not been identified: one sterling silver decorative cup, okay, decorative dish, one gold color bracelet, one 1974 Kennedy half dollar, one 11-inch Indian head knife with a 5-inch blade. Now, the reason I'm reading this is because Alfred Hunt Howell, his family had a whole list of items that were in the Howell house. And so what I'm going to do now is compare this list with that list and see if anything was missing. But I'm not going to do that now. We're going to do that on a later date.
Mhm.
Bottom half of a wooden box, red interior, one deluxe knife set in a gray case, X-Acto type. The following is a list of burglary tools found in the vehicle: one large blue crowbar, 4 screwdrivers, a heavy roll, a roll of clear heavy-duty tape, one yellow flashlight.
And what brings to my mind is you mentioned you used the word, I think you said he knew your home in as much as he had cased your home and knew where your father put the grocery money.
He had to have, because it wasn't an obvious spot that
Right.
like you would have had to have known that was there, looked for it.
Yeah. So right here, um, how do these people they must know about these homes? I mean, you need time to go through these affluent large homes. I've been in them. They either have inside information and know just where to go, or I don't know how they get the time in doing
Right.
all of this.
Well, let's read the next passage because that might give us a little bit more insight.
Oh yeah, I made notes here. This is peculiar, very peculiar.
A subsequent debriefing of the suspect revealed the following. They will commit the burglaries at any time of day, but it appears they prefer the afternoon hours. I think that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
The houses they hit range from upper middle class to affluent neighborhoods. They also prefer corner properties. If the house has a garage, it will usually have a window. They will check to see if anyone is home, ring the doorbell, look in the windows, etc. The gang usually use 2 vehicles when they do a burglary. One vehicle will be stolen with different plates on it. They like TLC and dealer plates, but they will use passenger plates. The stolen vehicle may also have 2 different plates on it. All the vehicles that they steal are new. They will park the stolen vehicle in the driveway of the house they are hitting. The other vehicle will be parked nearby. Entry will be done any number of ways, but they like to pry open sliding doors. If the house is alarmed, they give themselves 60 seconds inside the house. It appears that when the house is alarmed, the perps usually take the drawers that contain the jewelry. See the attached photos and information on the subjects. More information will be forthcoming. All right, so the rest of this, some
Right.
members of the gang
And
have handguns.
here's something peculiar. If the house has an alarm, they give themselves 60 seconds, 1 minute in the house. And in 1 minute in the house, these affluent big homes, they know exactly where to go for the drawers that have jewelry.
That have the jewelry. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, it's impossible in 60 seconds. There had to be an inside job, like a plan of this is where you go, this is the layout. They find the booty. The locations had to be, if this report is accurate, 60 seconds, the alarm goes off. And if it wasn't 60 seconds, no alarm, they'd give themselves more time. So this just perplexes me, and I'm sure it does you. It had to be, if it's true, 60 seconds and an alarm goes off.
Well, it's what Ruby just says. It's a planned robbery. They knew
Yeah,
exactly what they were going
they knew
for.
just where to go. They knew where to go. There's inside information, and I'm not saying that the caretaker had any, I don't believe the caretaker had anything to do with Howell Sr.'s death, but it makes you think when somebody says he was mysterious. That we never know who speaks on the outside. Sometimes people stupidly speak and tell everything personal about where they work and whatever. But this just doesn't jive with me unless it's an inside job and like a map, a military maneuver. They know exactly where to go to get the drawers with jewelry. In 1 minute, they're going to go through every drawer in a house.
Well, that's an excellent point, and let's relate it back to the Howell house. That house is huge. I walk by it almost every day, and I marvel at the fact that how the hell did Nikolai know to be on some second floor looking up there? That house is humongous. He would have had, I mean, this speaks to the possibility that Nikolai knew that house beforehand. He knew the Howell house beforehand.
Or
This
somebody planned it.
or
Somebody exactly drew the interior architecture. Look, I've been in homes like that for 20 years. I visited a friend in Bellhaven, Connecticut. That's in the municipality of Greenwich. You should see those homes across the bay from the country club is the Reynolds home. Reynolds Wrap. It looks like a Greek or Roman palace.
Mm-hmm.
That it's impossible in 60 seconds, not knowing a place, to find out in all those rooms,
Where
sometimes 2 or 3 floors high, where the jewelry is kept in drawers.
Exactly. And so this then speaks to the question, was this because remember their MO is to do all this stuff here, and they had all these MOs. It had to have applied to the Howell house as well. And
Yeah.
so we don't know for sure. We don't know whether it was random. They just went in there looking and all that kind of stuff. But it does seem to me that part of this gang's MO was to know information about a house before they went in. And Book Club agrees with this. In my opinion, he definitely knew the house and what valuables were there. So we're all now starting to think that, and I'm starting to think it. I'm just going to allow myself to think it, that the whole notion of Nikolai and this guy Howell randomly meeting is probably not true. It seems to me, and my working hypothesis is that Nikolai knew that house and that somehow or other he had information about the Howell house before this alleged burglary and alleged murder.
Definitely, given all that was taken, and it gets even, well, we'll go on.
Right,
Even
exactly.
more perplexing.
So this is a very interesting document. And also one of the things that also is really important here to understand is this right here. They prefer the afternoon hours. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to speak to, of course, the timeline of what happened in the Howell home. In my opinion, as we're going to go through this investigation, not today's show, but as we're going to go through because remember, guys, I've already studied way in advance, right? But as we go along, there's going to be serious questions as to when this actually took place. We already know that that Alfred Hunt Howell was spoken to at 5 p.m. on the day of his alleged murder, right? This was April. It doesn't get dark too much after 5 p.m. in April. Okay.
Recollect to us who spoke to him at 5?
I believe it was the nephew.
The nephew.
The guy who was living in the house there and who was there that night. Peter. Okay. So someone spoke to and accounted for Howell's being alive at 5 p.m. That would be very close to dark. Okay.
Yeah.
Within an hour or two. And it's certainly not the afternoon. It's more tending towards evening. So that already, the Howell thing is a mystery of these guys prefer the afternoon hours. Now, it doesn't say they only do afternoon. It says that it says they prefer it. So why would Howell be any different? I don't know. But this is something that Lorenzo told me to watch out for, to find out when they like to go into the homes. And here it's saying it right here. They prefer the afternoon hours. Keep that in your memory banks.
What I would want to check is, when did daylight savings time start? It's April 23rd and 24th.
So someone out there, if you can find out, April 23rd, 1996, when was the daylight time? I'm sure that Google will has some sort of database on that.
Because, Manny, if it wasn't daylight savings time at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but it was technically evening, the sun had gone down, it was already dark. You know, we lazily usually say the evening begins at 6, but if it was already dark, you know, it's starting to turn dark right now, then that enhances familiarity of Nikolai knowing that home, even being welcome there. And
right, if he was in there at night.
Yeah, it's not the afternoon.
Right.
If it's not daylight savings time, you could say that the afternoon at the most goes until about 5 o'clock and then ceases.
Right. So here's Lorenzo is watching. I can speak on this. Gangs of Albanians were coming out of the Bronx, East Yonkers in the 90s. I became a DT in 1995 and remember the notice of this. All right.
And you know, somebody did say, Lydia, I believe, said, thank you, Mike. Lydia did say that he could possibly be of Albanian blood from, I think she said Switzerland. I might have that wrong, Lydia. I wanted to pay attention to the documents, but I thought I caught that. Yeah.
So I should have paid attention. Nikolai is Albanian. The Russian spelling of Nicholas is common. All right. So it's great that Mike's getting involved here. And of course, I cannot wait to do our first video with Mike analyzing this stuff. That's what everybody out there in the crowd is waiting for, Mike.
Oh, Lydia says Swiss German.
All right. So anyway. All right. So here is when Nikolai starts opening up his mouth. Okay. So Harrison Police Department and Nikolai take a road trip. Where do they take a road trip to? They take a road trip down to the Bronx. And these are 3 pages from these documents, which are 5 pages long. And I put them up here, the 3, just to show you them. But what I've done was just zoom in on each page, okay? Because there's no point in showing you all this up here, Okay, but we do want to show you that this did take place on 11/15/96, the same date as the same date as the arrest, it seems, but although I can't see how that's maybe this is talking about when the arrest was, but this is not too long after he gets arrested in Harrison, and this is Harrison, New York Police Department. A little hard to see, but this is an incident report from Harrison. This actually might have been the arrest report because it's the same date, 11/15/96. So let's read this and see if we can get any more insight into this. So reference above case number, I assisted, and in furthering their burglar investigation of redacted this date and time, I assisted by taking notes as we were directed about by person one, Nikolai Aman, who was in custody for the burglary of said residence, and at his suggestion, wanted to show us around and give information on various pawn shops and persons involved, burglaries, robberies, and stolen cars. So right here, we already know that as soon as Nikolai is arrested, he wants to start talking. Okay.
Yeah.
He just wants to start giving people up immediately.
Yeah, and this could be connected to that beautiful handwritten letter of his where he says, the police found where I was because I was giving her home as my address.
I don't get it.
He wrote, that letter?
Yeah.
The human side?
Right.
He's writing, and he says something about where the police had located him because the girl, the woman, whether she had his or a boyfriend, he had given her address as his address.
Right.
And I think that's how he said they traced him.
Well, they had him arrested here, so they didn't need to trace him.
But that could, we don't know if anybody gave them more information, and hence all of a sudden he says, okay, I'll show you everything.
True, but let's just deal with what we have on this piece of paper. So Ron R. Sunset in New York on 4/20. Thank you very much. Was 7:46. All right, so I was totally wrong about that. It was still daylight at 5 p.m., but it certainly was not the afternoon hours. It was after 5 o'clock when people come home from work. Up until 7:46, you had light. Okay, so in either case, let's carry on. While en route to redacted, Aman made self-incriminating statements about several robberies he and person two, redacted, had committed in redacted. These robberies mostly took place within 3 or more blocks of redacted and involved using a BB gun to scare people into giving. And then it just goes to this page. It doesn't finish. It's weird. Mr. Aman then described a redacted, but that he witnessed while riding as a passenger in one of the cars. All right. So this might be the start of the talking about the Howell thing. He stated that the vehicle was redacted that was driving through the... All right. So this is all redacted, so we can't see. At this point, we had exited the redacted in the redacted, and Mr. Aman pointed out various points of interest. First, he pointed out the house of person redacted and the vehicle he uses, vehicle number 1, which belongs to person 5. All right. Had told him it was stolen. All right. I don't understand why these reports have such weird English that go from one place to another, but I'm just giving you guys the order of what I have. So it's not much I can do about that.
And numerically, there's proof of a gang. We reach eventually 6 persons.
Right.
Go on.
Right. I took down the license plate and checked it with myself, negative something 1. He then pointed out person 5's apartment building and stated, so here Nikolai is giving up people. He's giving up names and saying what they're doing. Mr. Aman says that they drove the truck sometime in June 96 and that redacted lives in either the redacted and is only about 17 years old. So this is more confirmation, Eric, of Nikolai, wanting to recruit kids for his little burglary heist. Okay.
This goes, this type of crime goes way back, even centuries, where the older criminals get the younger people to join. You could read about it in Charles Dickens' novels, Oliver Twist. You could go to Naples, where the mafia of Naples, the Camorra, begins centuries back. They train the youth to be professional criminals, whether pickpockets or thievery like this.
Mr. Aman then pointed out the redacted, which is 1 block south of redacted, and said that's where everybody hangs out. He then showed us a locksmith shop on redacted off. All right. So for some reason, those first 3 pages, like they just make no sense. But here's page 4 and 5, which are less redacted. Okay. Stole a TV and an Iowa mini CD stereo system from that house, but redacted arrive them at redacted near the redacted. I then asked Mr. Aman how he got to this house in redacted. He said that they took the Hutch North to redacted. So this is talking about the Harrison crime. Okay. Because they took the Hutch North. That goes to Harrison, New York.
From the Bronx, yeah.
Correct. Turn right and the street was there. It's the first house on the right, has a garage with window, and the front door is to the right facing the street. He left the car running in the driveway with the trunk open. Mr. Aman then showed us the house of redacted, contacted, and advised him. Mr. Aman also advised us that redacted has a garage he uses for stolen, pawned items around the corner from the storefront. He pointed out a gray garage door immediately to the right of redacted and stated he buys everything except jewelry. This is probably 3580 Netherland Avenue, because we saw that the garage door was just to the right of the front door, which I think is what that's saying here. But we don't know for sure. Okay.
But it was somebody who bought their goods.
Mr. Aman then directed us to 2 parks that everybody hangs out at in Riverdale, and then took us over to redacted. Mr. Aman told us that he and a couple of other guys did a burglary at, here we go, at 4602 Palisade Avenue, in which one of his buddies shot the homeowner. He also implicated a New York telephone employee as their lookout at the top of the driveway while they parked in the house's garage. All right, so this is interesting right here. So the first
New York telephone.
So the first day, right, the first day that he's arrested, and immediately he starts talking about the shooting. Okay. But notice that he says shooting. There's nothing about getting hit over the head with a candelabra or a lamp. It's now all of a sudden the first thing is a shooting. And he doesn't even say that he did it. He said that his friend, his buddy, shot the homeowner. All right.
And there was a telephone operator who is that telephone operator?
Yeah. Telephone employee.
Yeah.
Right.
So sometimes these people could go to work at someone's home and they know how to case the joint. They could be a telephone operator, an electrician, a plumber.
Right. So remember, everybody, you should be taking notes. He's talking about a New York telephone employee, okay, as their lookout. All right. That's going to actually become more important later. Not today, but later in our investigation.
This is where I have something to say. This doesn't make sense. Go ahead.
Sorry, Eric. Another house on redacted that redacted have targeted for a future burglary where they believe the homeowner has $50,000 in gold. Now, right there, how would they know that the homeowner has $50,000 in gold?
Where does that information come from that the gold is worth $50,000? It had to be told to somebody.
Right. So
it had to be known.
So this is what's being implied to me here is that Nikolai had an intelligence operation going on.
And what Mike James has contributed makes sense. Nothing against the Albanian people, but when he speaks of Albanian gangs, there's something well organized here.
Oh, yeah. Big time. All right. Mr. Aman then directed us to a redacted place on redacted where he pointed out vehicle number 2 and told us that person number 6 owns said vehicle and uses it like a police car to stop drug dealers and rip them off. Mr. Aman,
Well, go ahead. I'll return to this.
Mr. Aman also stated that redacted works at redacted vehicle 2 I can't read that. At that point, Mr. Aman says, that's about it for now. Let's go to redacted. He directed us to redacted, showed us the parking lot where redacted, and then to redacted, and told us that is one of the pawn shops they use to sell stolen jewelry. He showed us the We Buy Gold jewelry store at Redacted and said they sell jewelry there as well as another store. And while in the area, for Aman stated the burglarized the Redacted twice this past summer, once in August and once in September. We then returned to Harrison. So that didn't make much sense to me.
But there's a question here.
Yeah.
Person number 6 pretends that he has a police car and is ripping off drug dealers. How long is that going to persist before the drug dealers, I mean, these are guys who are probably connected, they're of a lower level of crime, are not going to find out who this guy is? How can he be ripping off these drug dealers and get away with it? There's no retaliation?
That's a good question, but people beyond my pay grade, like Lorenzo and 22, are going to have to answer those.
Yeah.
Because they have the direct experience with these people. But in these 5 pages, we have the first inkling, of course, of Nikolai's first confession. He immediately brings them to Palisade Avenue, and he immediately starts talking about his buddies shooting a guy there, and that they used the telephone truck to do this dastardly deed. Okay, now here's another one of these pages that's like, it's weird. This is in the data dump with no date given, but it's except for late September 96, and no other information about who wrote this or where, but it seems to be similar in nature, where they're talking about no one was supposed to be home. Nikolai was supposed to drive and get into the house. They were supposed to get 200,000 to 300,000 in jewels. So there again, they're casing places that they know what's there already. Why would the Howell home be any different?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Entered for jewelry, dealt with this place, the state buyers. Nikolai was supposed to get 25,000 for his involvement. Nikolai told that he had backed out of the job 2 weeks ago. And then here we go, early March 96, Riverdale, Palisade Avenue, 240s, 4 to 5 shots, old guy, Nikolai in stolen car. So there he is talking about this again.
Mm-hmm.
And the only date I can get on this next page is 2796. So it has to be either 11 or 12, right? Because there's no other dates after 96.
Yeah.
It goes to 97.
I like what Book Club had said about the fence paying people for information.
That was Lorenzo. Hold on.
Lorenzo, I'm sorry.
The fence pays people, including home care workers, etc., to keep their eyes and ears open for booty. The fence is basically paying for info, not unusual at all. It's happening as we are here. Interesting. So there's a whole network of people out there who are using others to case your joint for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then they tell people like Nikolai and his band of criminals what's going on. All right, interesting. And then Book Club says home health care are paid like crap, look to supplement their income. Interesting. All right. So we're getting some more insight here that this was possibly a much more organized robbery of the Howell home than we have been led to believe so far, where they just ended up at this guy's house and he just randomly walks into some random house and scares the guy and ends up killing him. It seems to be a little bit more detailed than that.
And there's a contribution from Book Club about what I brought up about the ripping off drug dealers, that they're not going to mess with Albanian organized mobsters.
Right. So what's the ultimate point here? I don't quite get that.
The ultimate point is that I still wonder, no matter what level of crime those drug dealers were, sooner or later there should have been a retaliation. If you're ripping people off pretending you're a cop, they're going to get you.
Right. Unless, of course, with book clubs, I think what book club's saying is that the people that Nikolai might have been involved with were more heavy people, were
Right.
higher on the totem pole,
Right.
so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. All right, cool. The subject was advised of his Miranda warnings by Redacted at 17:20 hours this date and agreed to answer questions. Redacted took some initial notes regarding burglaries the subject was involved with. I also spoke to the subject regarding any robberies the subject had either participated in or knew about, and he, subject Nikolai, spoke about a robbery that took place earlier this year in March or April on Palisades Avenue in the 240s. The subject stated that he heard 4 or 5 shots and that he was sitting outside the house, big private house, in a stolen car. The subject went on to say that Redacted and Redacted went into the house. Both Redacted were armed. The subject believes that the guns were revolvers. The subject states that Redacted and one other burglarized Redacted. On Redacted, he states that he talked to. All right, so about doing money was we can't glean any information from this,
No, but once again, though, it's not Nikolai who's pulling the trigger, if I've understood it exactly.
he's not even placing himself in the house.
No, he's hearing it. He's hearing the shots, but he is not. He's not the one who is the homicidal perpetrator. He's an accomplice,
Right.
but he's not the one who's murdering Howell.
So his initial singing, right? His initial opening up of his big fat mouth, he's not talking about I did it. He's not saying I did this. I want to confess. He's giving up his accomplices, right? And probably these next documents here speak to maybe why he was doing this, but it does seem pretty immediate, Eric. Like on 11/15, he was out there already talking about this. The day he was arrested, he was sitting there talking about this murder at Alfred Hunt Howell's house, committed by his friends. So these are our last 2 documents of the day, guys. Again, we're taking this slowly. Our next show will be much more deeply on more of Nikolai's confessions, because there's at least 2 different versions that we're going to look at after this.
May I make a quick point?
Of course.
The fact that he immediately starts to divulge all this information and show where his mates in crime live means that he's not really involved with an organized mafia where he's going to be talking about other people and they could get after him.
True. He obviously doesn't have much fear of his accomplices in that case.
Right.
So it does speak to these people being lower level. Again, a bunch of mysteries, which we need to start getting some local flavor to maybe fill in the gaps. People who knew Nikolai, people who knew his accomplices, people who could start giving me names. I could start speaking to people, because I am heavily into this. So here is Westchester District Attorney's Office, Janine Pirro, Tony. This was to ADA Tony Castro. This is the Assistant District Attorney in the Bronx. From ADA Robert Neary, who was the Westchester District Attorney. So this is Westchester writing to the Bronx, and this is 98. So this is a little later. Okay. But what he's talking about here are the 2 memos we discussed Aman. These actually are referring to memos that were written a year before. Okay. Actually, no, memos that were written in 1996, very quickly after the arrest. Okay.
We got those memorandums.
Correct. They're right here. Okay.
Right.
So December 2, 1996. So what these talk about are plea deals. Okay. This morning, a meeting with the above defendant and his attorney of legal aid was held in my office to discuss his cooperation. The meeting was held at the request of Redacted. During the 20-minute meeting, it was explained to the defendant, Nikolai, that if he cooperated to the extent that significant amounts of loot were recovered and persons arrested for burglaries, then he would be offered a 3-year sentence. If his cooperation amounted only to being fully and candidly debriefed by authorities and his identifying accomplices and locations burglarized, then a sentence of 5 years would be offered. As a predicate felon, the 5-year sentence is in the mid-range available on a Class D felony, burglary 3rd degree, with which he is charged. I feel the 5 years is a fair disposition on an SCI since police gained significant intelligence information, closed some open cases, and perhaps stand a chance of arresting Aman's colleagues if they continue to operate in Westchester. It was agreed that if some outside jurisdiction charged Aman with any crime, then our deal was off. The deal would also be canceled if it was learned any violence was employed by the defendant or his cohorts in any of the crimes he reveals. Defendant has given some info on an alleged shooting at a Bronx address, but he was advised by Redacted to reconsider shedding any more light on that incident, since he might be chargeable with that offense as an accomplice, and that determination would be made by the Bronx DA without our offices having actual control of the charging decision. This meeting concluded with Aman going out for a ride. So this is the ride that we just read about, and debriefing with the Harrison detectives to point out places that he knew were burglarized. He agreed to take a similar debriefing ride on Wednesday with Greenberg police. Both agencies will report back to me concerning the results of their sessions with Aman. It was agreed that the defendant would enter his guilty plea via SCI sometime in January 97. So we have one more page to get through, but I want to talk about this. So it seems like the chronology of events were: they meet with Nikolai after the arrest. They offer him a plea deal if he starts talking. He agrees to this. They take those rides to the Bronx that we just read about in these pages here. Okay, in these pages here. And he starts telling them about he starts living up to the agreement set forth in this. He starts giving them identifying accomplices, locations burglarized. In fact, he gives much more. He gives pawn shops where they sell the stolen goods. He shows a fencing operation in Riverdale at 3580 Netherland Avenue. He talks about people stealing money from drug dealers and using stolen cars. So it seems like the chronology is they offered him a deal, and so that's why he started talking.
To give people up, or else he would have spent 5 years in jail for the crime instead of 3. But they also want the loot and everything recovered.
Right.
The loot were recovered. But as of now, they say the alleged shooting, this is before there is ever in 1997 the intervention of Plimpton and Morgenthau,
right,
and the exhumation of the ashes of Howell Sr. to prove whether or not there's metal particles in his body. So it's before the post-mortem autopsy or whatever forensics test. What I would like to know from all of this, especially, when was this interconnection? How did this interconnection take place of the different law enforcement jurisdictions?
Well, remember, this page here, which was the cover page of the facts of these documents, was in 98. It was in the thick of the investigation with the Bronx DA.
Yeah.
So these memorandum right here, which were written in 1996, had nothing to do with the Bronx or any law enforcement.
There is a concern, if I'm right, advised to reconsider shedding any more light on that incident, since he might be chargeable with the offense as an
accomplice. Yeah, but meanwhile, when he goes out and he starts,
that determination would be made by the Bronx DA, and our office having no actual control over the charging decision.
Well,
so they did not want to lose control of this case to the Bronx, it seems.
True, and they didn't, and they clearly were not taking his this very seriously, because they were like, "Yo, don't talk about this alleged shooting."
Right? They say alleged. They say it's an allegation, not a fact.
Right, and meanwhile, when he goes out with the detectives the next day after all this stuff here, after they made this deal, and he starts singing, he totally disregards this over here, and he talks about his friend shooting the guy. And so it's like he wanted to talk about this. It's
and
like
he becomes an accomplice.
Right. So he goes against the advice here. He talks about it anyway. And so this guy is like, he's like dying to talk about this alleged shooting. It's very weird. Because again, he was only facing 5 years maximum. Why in the hell would he speak about this in the first place? And therein lies the entire mystery. So let's go through
why
this.
Would he even speak about the other burglaries?
Well, because he could get. Yeah, why would he speak about burglaries in the Bronx?
They didn't know the other people. He told them about the other people.
Yeah.
The cops knew less. The law enforcement knew less, as far as we know, than the man who wrote to you when he was a youth out on the street in the Bronx about what he was doing.
That's true. And that would make sense because the street always knows more than the cops do, at
Right.
least in the
They always
beginning.
do. In fact, they have a better intelligence network sometimes because they're not hampered by routine or bureaucracy.
So now Agent 99 says because he was a dumbass. Now, now that could be very true, Agent 99, but still, he didn't seem like a very dumb criminal to me. He was already a very hardened criminal. He was robbing houses. He was involved with a semi-organized gang. The issue is why, and of course, book club. It all goes back to just humanity. He has guilt, and he wasn't a bad guy. So we have to keep an open mind here.
Yeah,
We have right. We at this point we don't know what the hell happened in that house. There
I
there are
accept what Book Club says,
right.
but look what Lorenzo says.
We don't have a clue what happened in that house at this point. Even with his confession of saying that his friends did it, we still don't have a clue. The mysteries that are still out there are why would he speak in the first place, and then of course we're as we go along in this investigation we're going to realize certain criminal forensic anomalies, like again, um Alfred Hunt Howell was last seen at 5 o'clock. Yeah, there were 2 hours of daylight left, but it was still after hours. It was the point when people start coming home from work, right? If his crew loved to go in during the daylight hours, what were they doing there after 5 p.m.? We have the issue of the stolen New York telephone truck, which we're going to have to deal with, which comes up again in the investigation. And then we also have the issue of there was another person in the house that night. Alfred Hunt Howell's nephew, Peter, was in the house that night. He talks about it to the New York Police Department, and yet there's no investigation whatsoever about into this guy. So Lorenzo, again, we love the cops' thoughts on this, especially Lorenzo. So I'm assuming most of you have never done state time. He was terrified of doing hard time. I have had guys kill themselves for nickel and dime stuff because they couldn't do time.
That's very true because I once had to pick my father up at the Nassau County Jail where he was doing medical work. And the moment you see your fellow human being behind bars, it's frightening. That you don't know what that world is like if you've never known it. It's frightening to see some good-looking guy behind bars like that with
Now,
God walking. It's intimidating.
now the only devil's advocate I'm going to play on that, and I'm not questioning Mike
Mhm.
because Mike has he knows about criminals like I know about plants. Okay, so I'm not going to question it. But in the letter that we read at the beginning of this, there was a contradiction. Nikolai
Mhm.
says now he could just be boasting, okay, but he
Mhm.
says you don't have to worry about me because I can handle myself in here. So
Yeah.
he's talking about himself as if he doesn't have any problem with being in prison and he can handle himself just fine. So again, that's probably boasting to a girl that he liked, more likely than not. But it does contradict a little bit what my man Lorenzo just said. And I'm not saying that again, Lorenzo, to
No,
be
it's a different
contradictory. We just
perspective.
have to bring up right. We just have to bring up all that stuff.
There are different angles. There's more than one aspect to one person. And of course, at the end of that letter, he's a very strong centered man. She has a little boy, and he says, soon you will have that little girl. Think of them. I'm fine. I'm paraphrasing.
Right,
He's a very
exactly.
strong. Now, Mike Lorenzo brought up another thing. He mentioned his lawyer advised him not to speak. So at this point, is it the lawyer that the Bronx County Judge Brendan Fitzgerald gave the family, who would later defend Nikolai Aman? Is it uh, Larry Sheehan?
We don't know, and we're
Is
not going to
it
know.
Schumann?
Right.
But this is the other thing. You say the police. Why are the police open to speaking at all to the nephew in the house, and yet they shun the son, Hunt Howell, and the other intimate family members of the direct line?
I don't know, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. So let's just deal with what we have in front of us. Because
No, I'm just
yeah,
concurring with what you brought up, Manny. The questions come.
right, exactly. But let's deal with this, and this is our last page for today. So again, this is part of the same deal. This was November 21st, 1996. So a few days later, this first memorandum, oh, I'm sorry, this was December 2nd. I should have put these in, these were in the wrong order. Duh. This morning, a meeting was held in our offices with the above burglary defendant and his attorney of the Legal Aid Society who had requested the meeting. Present also redacted. I explained to the defendant in the presence of all of the above that he presently faced a definite sentence from 5 to 15 years on the C violent felony of burglary as a predicate felon, and that if he cooperated fully telling police everything he knew about crimes here and elsewhere, I would recommend a 5-year sentence if he pled guilty. I added that if he gave information that led to arrests and convictions of others and or the recovery of substantial amount of stolen property, he would be offered a D felony and a 3-year recommendation. The defendant declined this offer initially and again a second time after speaking alone for 10 minutes with his attorney. He was returned to the bullpen and his case is on again tomorrow in the Harrison Town Court. So here he is in November, not wanting to take a deal. They're offering him a deal. Here he is. Sorry, this should have come second on December 2nd. So he's in jail for 3 weeks now. He's in the Harrison jail for 2 or 3 weeks. And now all of a sudden, whoops. Sorry, my camera seems to have disappeared. Give me a second here. Video. I don't know what's going on. Well, my camera has disappeared. Give me a second. Let me try to unplug it and replug it back in.
Take your time, Manny. We're all here.
I'm trying. Video. There we go.
There you
All
are.
All right, cool. All right, so we're back. So here they are a few weeks later, and now he's willing to talk. And then but in the meantime, he went out on so I'm getting the dates are very muddled here because it says here that he goes out and takes a road trip with these guys on 11/15/96 and starts singing the day he's arrested, which doesn't make sense. Because it would seem like all of this is after they did all those deals with him. So I wonder
better dates for that document there.
Right. I think what's going on is that this was the initial, I think up here this is the initial arrest information, but it has nothing to do with when they went out on these runs. These runs had to have come after these documents right here, after these discussions here on December 2nd. Here, because it says here, the meeting concluded with Aman going out for a ride and debriefing the Harrison detectives. So he's offered a deal he's offered a deal right away, November 21st. He refuses it. On December 2nd, they come back and they offer him a deal, which he then agrees to because he goes out then for a ride and debriefing with the Harrison detectives, which then leads to these pages right here, where he starts showing the places where his accomplices lived, what cars they drove, and where you can find stolen goods. And despite his attorney telling him to shut the F up and not talk about anything, he starts talking about the Howell murder in this page right here. Okay. And this doesn't give a date, but it's the same ride around. He starts talking about the Howell murder.
And that's the mystery. Why?
Right. He starts talking about the Howell murder right here. Even though he was advised not to, he starts singing about it, and then he blames other people for it. So anyway, I mean, again, I'm not sure exactly what we concluded here, but clearly there was a deal being made with Nikolai, so that's why he started talking to get his sentence reduced. But at the same time, he was advised not to talk about this murder, alleged murder, and yet he keeps on wanting to talk about it for some reason.
Perhaps because he thought that his accomplices, whom he's identifying, would speak about it.
Right.
And therefore he says, I was there, the murder took place, there were gunshots, but I was not in the house.
Right, exactly. So here you are. I'm giving you a murder now. See what a great guy I am? Those people did it over there. Look at how much I'm giving you more than you wanted. I don't know. It makes no sense. I mean, I can't speak to any of this because I'm not a criminal and I never did any
Oh,
of this
here's the
type
date,
of what.
November 15th, 1996. On
No, we already
11,
got, we
we
already
already
got,
have that date.
we already got that.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
we already got
similar
that.
page.
I think what's going on with these 11/15/96 is that they just refer to the initial arrest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, remanded, and then something over here. It's not easy to see this close up. I'm going to try to get
It
better things.
it would not be absurd to think that when they go to question him about other burglaries, they were investigating these burglaries and somebody gave his name.
It's possible. I mean, at this point, all I know is that where we are in this case is that Nikolai was known around Riverdale. Everyone kind of knew this rumor about 4602 Palisade, and that he's arrested for burglary in Harrison. He's offered a deal which he initially doesn't take. 2 weeks later, they offer him another deal which he then takes, and he immediately goes out and starts ratting on everybody, talking about his accomplices, and inexplicably talking about a murder that his friends did. And we're gonna see the story changes over time. Remember, everybody, that he initially tells the police that his accomplices did it, and he was waiting outside. So we're going to see very different takes of it later on in our next show. So Eric, tell us what you think, and then we're going to let everyone have the rest of their evening without thinking about some old man getting killed.
Well, Nikolai Aman, I call him a glass key, fragile but important to open up a home and suddenly make it transparent and glass itself. There's too many little contradictions, too many mysteries. I almost don't know what to say at this moment.
Neither do I.
I have to be truthful. And usually I'm on target with things. And it makes no sense why he opens up his mouth like this, except there's information we don't have here that the police already knew when they went to speak to him. He's arrested for a burglary in Harrison, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why did they start talking about other burglaries with him? Because somebody tied his name to them.
Or they just, or he had past convictions already. Don't
Right.
forget, he was in jail already for burglary, and he had been arrested already, according to that Riverdale Press article. He had been arrested already for more burglaries and check forgeries. So he was a known entity. He had a record. He wasn't. This wasn't his first arrest.
The question is, why does he speak the way he does? Why does he tell on everyone else?
Right.
What is missing from this story? Why? And also the other thing, you mentioned this, and you and I would have not done. These other journalists receive information, but they don't evaluate, and they're not investigative journalists.
No, they're just stenographers for the system. They're just reporting what they get from the cops, and that's it. No investigation.
We're dealing with two main parallel stories that eventually merge, but along the line of traveling with these stories, we're not getting answers to the contradictions.
But there are certain little gems that came out of this episode, in my opinion. The first was that the preferred MO of this gang was to go in during the daytime hours. Okay. So that's going to be an issue when we start looking at the timeline of when Alfred Hunt Howell was last seen, and so on and so forth. We have the issue of the tricky little issue of that it's very possible that this organized gang of burglars knew exactly what they were looking for in these houses, which means that either Nikolai was in 4602 Palisade Avenue, the home of Alfred Hunt Howell, before, or he had an intelligence network that fed him information about that home.
They definitely had inside information. I would like to know, did the police pursue and ask the detective, the assistant district attorney Castro, how in 60 seconds could you pull this off? Tell us, how did you get this information? You must have had information about what was in the house, where the jewelry drawers were.
Well, let me tell you something about Castro. I've been trying to reach Castro. He just simply won't answer my emails or calls. The guy doesn't want to talk. But the Great Book Club has found a document in these, which we're not going to get into the details of because we're not there yet and we're not ready. But I'm just letting the audience to be aware that the Great Book Club found a document in all of these 405 pages. He found one document that was directly related to the ADA Castro, which, let's just put it this way, it's extremely suspicious, and it makes me wonder what in the hell was really going on with this case. And I think we're going to leave it there.
Yeah, well, Castro was from Bronx County. That's where you get Morgenthau and Plimpton. And, I'd like to know, would it be called internal affairs investigation? Did they ever start to make an inquiry with Tyrone Ramsey, the detective who was there, and everyone else as to why they didn't mention any gunshot wounds?
It doesn't seem like that was done. Certainly no documents on that. But all right, Eric, let's take the audience on out, and then I'll see you off the air at the end.
Well, God bless everybody. Have a blessed Sunday. Thank you. And I'm not my usual self today because my mind is racing with this case. I'm sorry.
Mine
I'm
too.
perplexed. I have question after question. I'm kind of obsessed with this case, and I can't stop asking question of a question I've already put.
It's all I
can't-
think about.
I can't help it. I know I have answers, but it's just he has to be found.
I agree. Nikolai,
He has
somewhere
to
on the, he's either dead or he's somewhere alive on this earth. There's only two
and the immediate Howell family has to come forward to help. I mean, they must suffer from this. They're human beings.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll start getting more people involved. Again, we're throwing stones in the pond. So Eric, thank you so much for your great contributions today. As always, you catch things that I don't catch, and you ask the great questions which need to be asked. So
And remember, it works both ways.
thanks, my friend.
Both
So
ways.
I'll see you off the air, okay? Just hang
Okay,
around.
God bless you.
All right. All right, guys. Well, that was a great one, closing on 2 hours. I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. Again, I know that this case isn't, a huge case in terms of its international sexiness, and it's not the Son of Sam, but yet somehow or other, I'm finding this to be infinitely more interesting than Son of Sam ever was. When I thought Son of Sam was a group of people, it was interesting to me. But when we finally found out that it was just old Disco Dave alone, it quickly lost all luster for me. And when we found out how much Maury Terry lied to us about the whole thing, I actually became disgusted at the Son of Sam case, and I never even wanted to touch it or talk about it again. I'll only return to Son of Sam under a few circumstances, which we won't get into now. But other than that, I have no interest in that boring ass case. But there's something about this case that is so intriguing to me, probably because it's just took place in my neighborhood, and it's exposing this ugly underside of the neighborhood I grew up in, which was idyllic to me growing up. I thought I lived in freaking paradise. Now I'm finding out that 2 blocks from where I live was a fencing operation. Nikolai was stealing cars everywhere and picking up people in the stolen cars and charging them cab fares. He was breaking into all these houses, check forgery. There were fences here. There were places, the pawn shops that bought stolen gear there. There were all sorts of kids that Nikolai was trying to recruit for his gang. And then, of course, you have this whole issue of this elite nest of deep staters, the Dodges, the Howells, the Curlins, the Plimptons, the Morgenthaus, all brought into this because of the strange death of Alfred Hunt Howell. So listen, guys, we're really only the beginning this. We raised some questions today. We are carrying on, of course, on this dual track. We're going to have some conspiracy shows, and I only use that term generically. We're not talking about things that don't exist. We're talking about, when we talk about conspiracy and we talk about these deep staters, we're dealing with actual people with histories that we can actually research. We're not not making up stuff. We're not associating people who shouldn't be associated with. We're talking about a nest of deep staters that have had extreme power in the United States, going up to the highest levels. And then we're talking about Nikolai Aman and his group of people, and they came together somehow on that fateful day in 1996. So we're only just starting this. It's only going to get more interesting from here. We're only going to raise more questions from here. And of course, we are super excited to get the local people involved here from Riverdale who may know a thing or two about, well, about the cast of characters, whether it's the deep staters or whether it's the gang of kids from Greystone Avenue. So, my friends, be on the lookout, please, for the next episode. And until then, I want to say thank you very much for joining us on this episode, number 6 of The Strange Death of Alfred Hunt Howell.